Welcome to the Bipolar Buzz podcast, where we slice stigma surrounding mental illness one episode at a time, and we give others courage to do the same. I am your host, Lay, a wife, mom, daughter, sister, coworker, and friend who also lives with bipolar 1 disorder. So, without further ado, let's slay. Welcome to the Bipolar Buzz podcast, where we discuss any and everything mental health. My guest for today is Alexis Auerselt. She is the host of a podcast called DNA Surprises, which was started after she experienced a DNA surprise herself in the summer of 2021. Before that summer, neither she nor I knew that the other person existed. And now we're about 2 years into calling each other sister. So in today's episode, we will be discussing how this life-altering surprise has affected Alexis mentally and emotionally, and what it means for her to now sort of relearn herself and exist in the world as a person that she hadn't even fully met until a couple of years ago. So everyone meet Alexis. Alexis, welcome to the podcast. We are so happy to have you share your story with us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's start from the beginning. So before July of 2021, when you had this big DNA surprise, who did you know yourself to be?
Ooh, so I always felt like I had a really strong sense of identity, which is why my DNA surprise, I think, rocked my world so much. So I am a wife, a mother. I work full time. I'm a friend, sister, daughter. And I've always felt like I was a very strong and independent person, self-aware, and I always really felt like I knew myself really well. I grew up multi-ethnic. So my dad is Mexican and my mom is of European descent, white. And so growing up, that is always how I identified, and that's what I knew myself to be. And any issues that I had around that identity, people questioning my race or anything like that, I just attributed to, I'm mixed race or I'm multi-ethnic. Like this is just how I turn out. Everyone turns out different. And I grew up with two sisters who, we look kind of alike. In hindsight, now I see more differences, but nothing that ever made me question, who I was.
So it sounds like you had such a strong identity and a strong sense of self, like you knew who you were. And so what prompted you to even take a DNA test in the first place?
I took the test because it was on sale for Prime Day on
Gotcha.
Amazon, and I thought it would be fun. I wasn't questioning, like I said, anything about who I was or what my identity was, but my dad's mom, so my paternal grandmother, or so I thought, had been researching her indigenous roots in the early 2000, like 2008, 2009. And she died tragically before she got a lot of those answers. And she was doing, research into that. And so it was kind of this combination of, oh, well, this is fun. It's on sale for Amazon Prime Day. Let me just take this test. And then also thinking, oh, this will be cool because I'll be able to dive into this further than she was able to, because DNA tests weren't as prolific at the time that she was doing all this research. So a lot of hers was like very manual and that kind of thing. So I just took the test for fun and just to learn a little bit more about myself. It had been on my wish list for over 3 years, I think, and nobody had ever bought it for me. We have
You're like,
our
I'm gonna get this for myself.
exactly. And we have the Amazon wish list, so for family, and we're like, what do you want for Christmas? It's like, here's this. Nobody ever got that. And so finally I was like, I'm gonna buy it for myself. It's on sale.
So it sounds like, because I know a lot of people kind of got into like the whole ancestry thing. I know at one point it was like this big thing where everybody was getting these tests. And like you said, there were all these sales for it, especially around the holidays. But nobody thinks about, at least, if they haven't been through it already, about what this could mean for their lives. Um, especially, when you don't know this big piece of you and that's been kept from you. So, you got the DNA test. Tell us what the results were and how did they initially affect you?
Yeah, so I got my results on I think it was a Thursday morning. I was sitting at my computer. I work from home. I was about to join a meeting and I get the little notification and it says, your Ancestry DNA results already. And I thought, oh, cool. Again, I'm not expecting anything traumatizing to happen. I'm thinking I'm just going to learn, how indigenous I am and what parts of Europe I descend from and that kind of thing. Maybe I'd have a famous relative I didn't know existed.
Mhm.
Like just fun. And I open up my results and I first look because I wasn't really interested in connecting with family. I was just curious about the ethnic side. And the first thing that pops out to me is there is no Latinx, no Hispanic, no Mexican, no Spanish, no Indigenous, nothing, 0% anything that I would have expected.
Hmm.
What I do see on the map, so for anyone who hasn't done Ancestry, like you see your results, they list all the percentages, but there's also like a map at the top of the screen that shows like all the regions that you descend from. And mine was very concentrated to North Carolina, North Carolina African Americans. And I was like, what? That is not right. I look over and then I see Nigeria, Cameroon, other things. And I'm thinking, this is not right. I do see some of the European that I expected. So I see
Right.
that. But everything else was clearly African American. Like that's what it was. And so I think I was just in shock. I was confused. I thought, oh, they got my results mixed up. Like,
Mhm.
of course, that's what happened to me. That, I send off my DNA and they mess up mine, right? And so then I click on my matches and I see at the top that there is a parent-child match.
Wow.
And it was with the person that I matched with had a picture that had like 7 people in it. So I couldn't tell which one was him. And the username was unclear as well. Like it was Damien plus a bunch of numbers. And I was like, I don't know who that is. I'm looking down. I see matches with um, other people whose names I don't recognize that looked high, like half siblings. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, that's no way. That cannot be right. And I'm looking and I'm just flipping back and forth between the ethnic results and this. And I'm like, okay, well, this man, from what I can tell with this group picture, is black. Like he's black. I can see that, but I'm not. So I kept scrolling, I kept flipping back and forth. And then I looked and I saw my uncle on my mom's side. And when I saw that, I said, oh, maybe it's a partial mistake. This is how far it goes,
That
right? Like
happens.
it wasn't confirmation for me that like, oh, this
Huh.
is real. Instantly, then I'm like, oh, it's a partial. I don't know. So I called my sister Amanda and I said, I I don't know what this is. Like I don't I don't understand. Like according to this, it's saying that I'm black and it's saying that dad isn't my dad because I'm matching with someone and I don't know who this is. And she really didn't know what to say. Like she was just like, uh, call mom. Like just call mom.
Mhm.
So I called my mom. Um, she sounded surprised, but not surprised, and was kind of um asking me like what test I took. And she kept saying, this is so shocking, but like not with a tone that made me think she actually thought it was shocking.
Gotcha.
And so I was like, well, I'm going to order a paternity test and test with dad. And she's like, okay, and I'll talk to him. And so I said, okay, I hang up. I call my husband. He was out of town, which we always joke that something always goes wrong when like one of us is out of town, but nothing at this level. It's usually like a broken dishwasher or something.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't answer because he was out fishing like on a lake with his dad. And so then I called my best friend and I was just crying on the phone. I fully dissociated, just felt completely outside of my body and in shock, but then also like crying. And then I ended up joining my work meeting that I was waiting for.
Wow.
Which again, looking back, I'm like, why did I do that? But I just felt like like I said, I dissociated. So I think I was just like, okay, I'm gonna join this call now. I don't remember the call. I really don't remember much of that day. Um, yeah, so it was just extremely, extremely shocking.
Yeah, and a word that you used in the very beginning when you were describing kind of what was going on in your head and how these results affected you was traumatic. And I don't think a lot of people really associate taking a DNA test with a trauma. But when you've experienced something like you did, where your dad is quote unquote not your dad, or your race, ethnicity is totally different from what you thought it to be, like now you're going through like this sort of identity crisis, like who am I, where do I come from, why didn't I ever know about this? Because how old were you when you took this test?
Yeah, I was 35 years old when I took the test, just before I turned 36.
So for 35, almost 36 years, you thought that you were white and Mexican, and that your dad was your dad. And now, I mean, you have your own family now and all these things, and you've gone on in life identifying as this person. And now you get this DNA test that says you're something different. So how did that affect your mental health?
Oh, it greatly affected my mental health. Um, and you're right. I think a lot of people don't think about how traumatic it is. So there's multiple parts of that. There's
Hmm.
the identity. And I was just talking about this with someone because somebody else who had an ethnic shift, because something that's really weird about this, especially when you are a mixed race person, is that people perceive you your whole life in so many different ways. You're constantly asked, what are you? What ethnicity are you? What are your parents? Are you adopted? Like all of these questions are things that I've grew up with my whole life because I look ambiguous. People can't put me in a box.
Uh-huh.
And I could kind of claim like anything and people would kind of have to believe me, honestly, because it's not like
Yeah.
so obvious, right? And so for me, like I'd been asked if I was black, mixed black, like all my life. And all my life, I was like, no, I'm not. I'm really not. My dad is Mexican. This is what I am. So I was actively denying the truth. I mean, I didn't know it was the truth
Uh-huh.
whole life. There's also this piece of how other people perceive you and how other people treat you in the world. So first, I want to acknowledge that as a mixed race Black woman and as a lighter skinned Black woman, like there's a level of privilege. Like I said, I could say that I was Mexican my whole life, and some people might kind of side eye me, but ultimately they'd be like, okay, like, they would believe
Uh-huh.
me. So there is privilege with my position. With that said, how many people have I interacted with in my life who thought I was Black, maybe treated me a certain way, or, going out to dinner in the South with my husband who's white and getting kind of weird looks and stuff like that. But I always felt like I can't claim that experience because I'm really not. I'm Mexican and white. So that's not my lived experience. Like I have empathy and I care and all of those things, but I would never claim that because that's not my experience. So then to find out the truth, it's very disorienting because, there's a certain element of of guilt, I think, for denying it when that was the truth. Then there's also, reconciling the privilege of, well, I was able to say that I wasn't, right? And in our country, like
Hmm.
that's not an easy experience. So, and if I wanted to, I guess technically, like I could go for the rest of my life being like, no, I'm Italian or I'm
Hmm.
Hawaiian or
You could.
whatever else I
Yeah.
wanted to do, you know?
And like you said,
And
people
so
would believe you.
they would believe me. So it's kind of just, I'm always like, head explosion kind of thing because it's just a lot to wrap around. And then the trauma to me that was bigger even than the racial shift, because in a lot of ways the racial shift made sense. A lot of the things that I've always liked, friends that I've had growing up, causes that I've been drawn to, in a lot of ways it was like, oh, okay, that's why.
Uh-huh.
um, but to feel betrayed by your parents for so long and to feel like everybody knew this secret except you. So
Hmm.
my story is that my dad met my mom when I was 2 months old. She'd been in a bad relationship that ended. She went through the pregnancy alone. They wanted to protect me from the person that they thought was my father, who was not Elena, my father. For the record,
For the
not
record.
him. Yeah, for the record, I always have to clarify this. And so when she met my dad, he met me at the same time, and he decided to raise me as his daughter. They thought that my biological father was Puerto Rican, which I do like to denote is not the same as Mexican, so it's still not okay to lie about somebody's background. Um, but so my grandma, both of my grandmothers knew, aunts, uncles, some cousins, they all knew. And so to find out that a bunch of people knew this secret about me and who I am was very, very upsetting. And, you should be able to trust your parents. And, your parents are the ones who should tell you the truth. And
Yeah.
so to have that like disrupted was extremely, extremely painful, even though I do believe that they were doing it for what they thought were the right reasons at the time.
Hmm.
As we came to find out through whatever may have happened, um, that person was not my father. And Elena's dad was actually my father. And they don't really remember each other, so I don't really know what that
Right.
happened. But he's a nice person and he was exciting and welcoming to me. And so there's also this trauma of now I wasn't exposed to a whole part of my life that I could have been exposed to. We
Right.
didn't know each other as kids. And
Uh,
you have said like you always wanted a sister and like those
yes.
things. And like we didn't even know each other existed. He didn't know I existed. And feeling like I missed out on that family connection.
Hmm.
Um, and that racial connection, because I
Right.
live in Arizona. There's a very small Black population here. So, I feel like that was also taken from me. So
Hmm.
multiple levels. And then the last piece that I would say is traumatic is the medical piece, which a lot of people don't think about.
Right.
Um, and so there's things like, mental health. I've had my own mental health issues in my life. There's physical health. I've had high cholesterol since I had my kids and was trying to trace down why, changing my diet, exercise. It does not run in either of my parents that I grew up with family, and asking them who in our family has high cholesterol. I don't understand. Like nobody else does. Why?
Yeah.
And again, like come to find out, I talked to our father and he's like, oh yeah, I've had high cholesterol for years.
Oh yeah. Me
And
too.
then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait. So like if I lose 20 pounds, that's not going to solve the problem. Like this is a familial issue that
Right.
I have been trying to troubleshoot with my doctor for over a year before I had my DNA surprise.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden I started making all these connections, and she was able to go, oh, okay, well, we actually do need to give you medication for this.
Yeah.
It's not going to help. Like, the things that we're doing are not going to help you. And that was really frustrating and kind of compounded that feeling of betrayal, because it was like, you listened to me complain about these health things and still didn't tell me. So,
Right.
yeah.
Alexis, I cannot imagine how that felt for you. Like every time I hear you tell your story, or every time I think about it, because I mean, I think about you a lot, obviously, but every time I think about it, I'm just like, that is so wild to me. Like all of these different layers of, I guess, betrayal and trauma that you experienced. And thank you for sharing kind of like the different levels of it, especially the genetic component, because I think that that part is widely kind of like ignored, not consciously really, but just kind of no one really thinks about, oh yeah, like my medical history, that has of course so much to do with your DNA and your biological parents. But one thing I've learned about you, and probably people can gather from just listening to you talk right now, is that you are big on telling the truth. You are a truth teller. So how long did it take you to actually accept the truth of the DNA surprise that you had? And how long did it take you to seek help for processing all of the trauma that you were experiencing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Lucky for me, I have that like destigmatizing, which I think is so funny that, again, there's the nature and nurture, like all those conversations, and like
Uh-huh.
Elena's the same way. Like, she lives out loud, she tells her story. And so it was super validating, like, to meet you
Uh-huh.
and with you and be like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it. So I knew I was going to need help right away, professional help, because it was way too much for me to handle. I was not okay. I was crying all day. I was dissociating. I felt like I wasn't really able to be there for my family, because I was just kind of getting through the day either in a state of numbness or in a state of just like depression and anxiety. So within a couple of days, I had texted a friend of mine who is a therapist and said, I need um, I need help. What do I need to look for? And she told me, you need to look for somebody who specializes in grief, trauma, those kinds of things, because I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know that there was a
Yeah.
whole community of people. Then I texted another therapist friend of mine and said, okay, I need a grief and trauma therapist in Arizona. Can you please help me find someone? She put out a call through a message board or listserv that she's on. And my therapist, Susanna Castro, I will scream her name from the she responded, and I talked to her, I think, the Monday after my DNA surprise,
That was really soon. Okay.
really soon, within a few days, and made an appointment, came in, cried my way through. And she really helped me with DBT skills so
Mhm.
that I could have some difficult conversations, with my parents, with my newfound family, with other people around me who were going to need to support me or just be aware of what was going on to a certain extent. Um, and yeah, I jumped right into processing and working through it because I knew I needed it.
That is awesome. So I guess how is your mental health now compared to when you first learned the truth?
It's much better. I really credit therapy with helping me a
Hmm.
huge amount. Again, with the DBT skills, I also did EMDR with her, around some specific moments during my DNA surprise processing,
Hmm.
and she helps me with that. Um, I think I want to acknowledge that you and our father and really everyone else in that side of the family, the newfound family, as I call y'all, have been super welcoming and accepting. And I think that that plays a huge part in it too.
Good. Yeah.
So for other people that are going through this who maybe don't have family who is accepting them, um, I think that that can make the journey a lot harder
Yeah,
because you don't get a lot of answers. And that connection that you're hoping for maybe isn't there. So I do think that was a huge piece of it. I always have had anxiety, depression, things like that. And luckily, when I had my DNA surprise, I was already medicated for that. So I
good.
think that that helped me quite a bit
Mhm.
to keep me kind of stable to get through. Um, but now I would say I really just feel, I mean, I still have moments for sure, but I definitely am in a much better place than I was in 2021.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear because I know you've done so much work, so much like personal work, and you've come so far, and I'm so so proud of you. And I know you're going to continue to do amazing things. So one of the things that you said earlier in this interview is that, of course, you never truly identified with your biracial identity of being a mixed race Black woman. How has this DNA surprise, if it has, how has it changed kind of the way that you show up in the world now? Has it changed the way that look or what that looks like for you?
Yeah, I think it has. I'm still figuring that part out. It's strange to just like all of a sudden be like, okay, these are experiences that I not necessarily, I mean, I still don't really feel comfortable claiming a lot of it, so to speak, but
Yeah.
um I think for me, how it's showing up a lot is, I always consider myself an ally before,
Uh-huh.
and now I still see myself that way, but also like an advocate. So if I hear things, I know, like I said, I am privileged because of the way that I look, and I will be a little bit more bold, like in a corporate setting, to call out if I hear something or to, speak to certain things or, speak truth to power, as I kind of often
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Um, and and so there's that piece. I also, have like explored more cooking. Like last
Hmm.
Thanksgiving was like the first time I ever made collard greens. Like
Oh,
I
really? Okay.
like and I love them. Like I've eaten them before.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Like I don't know. And I always felt like kind of weird, like appropriation or something. Like,
Uh-huh.
like
Uh-huh.
I'm not putting on a costume, like, oh, this is the kind of foods we're gonna, but like, okay, like how can I get in touch? What can I do? I made a sweet potato pie for the
Awesome.
first time, like just a pumpkin pie. Like, food, I feel like has been a really cool way to like get in touch with that part of me. Um,
Hmm.
making those visits to the South
Yeah.
and, being around that culture feels really good to me. Um, and then, like I said, a lot of other things, I think it just made sense again. Like, the
Yeah.
music that I listen to, like not that only like Black people are allowed to listen to certain kind of music or watch certain kinds of shows, but
Right, right.
I always joke about like I love Issa Rae. I love everything Issa Rae does. And I was such a fangirl of Insecure. And I remember one of our
Uh-huh.
first conversations we ever had, I told you that like sometimes I'd feel kind of weird watching it. Like, am I being like a culture vulture right now? Like, I love this.
Uh-huh.
And I had to be like, well, again, though, like it's not my lived experience, but there was something in me that's drawn to these things. And that's really interesting to me. So I try to just observe too, like how I'm
Hmm.
feeling about certain things or reflect on certain things that I felt connected to. Trying to like educate my kids more.
Yeah.
I did before, but it's going to be really interesting to me to see how they navigate that because they're,
Right.
most people just look at them and think they're white. And but then, what we were talking about, I think it was like Black History Month, and at school they learned about like segregation and things like that.
Hmm.
And my son was like, yeah, that was terrible if that used to happen. And so then I kind of explained, in our family history, like that is part of what people went through. Like, even your papa like had
Hmm.
experienced things like that. And, and for him, his mind is just blown because he has not been exposed to any of that.
Yeah,
Oh, because he's like in Arizona, and
right.
um, trying to educate them, letting them kind of figure things out, and just trying to give myself some grace. I know I'm not going to get everything
Definitely.
right, and I'm going to
Definitely.
be learning. I think the last piece, which really has been like the biggest piece for me, is my hair. I've never known what to do with my hair. I always straightened it. Like I always hated, like just never knew how to manage it, never really accepted it.
Yeah.
That's like another piece of where looking back, I'm like, well, had I had this information, maybe things would have been different.
Hmm.
But now I'm like on this curly hair journey, trying to, find ways to connect. And of course, everyone of any race can do whatever they want with their hair. But
That's
for
right.
me personally, I feel like trying to embrace that is another way for me to like connect with my roots, so to speak. No pun
Uh-huh.
intended.
Nice. No, I love how you're really, for lack of a better expression, I guess, taking ownership of like owning who you are and owning your identity instead of kind of, hiding from it or shying away from it, even though that is probably, maybe, I don't really know, maybe the easier thing to do would be to just continue to live like I'm not black, but I love that you are embracing your truth and that you're, like I said, owning it, and you're learning. You're never too old to learn. It's never too late to learn. Like you're trying to learn things. You are learning things, and you're passing it down to your kids too, because it's an important part of their history as well. So, in light of this surprise and kind of like all the things, all the moving pieces that you've kind of been talking about, what are some ways that you are staying mentally well?
I'm still in therapy. I was
Uh-huh.
able to reduce from weekly to bi-weekly, so that's been
Good.
good. I
Yes.
stay really connected with my community, and kind of doing that, being of service has really helped me feel like I am connecting with people. So this year we had a DNA surprise retreat, and that was amazing. Getting to, facilitate connections and healing within my community has been amazing. um, really listening to my body, honoring my body, moving, movement,
Hmm.
exercise, dancing, whatever it is that makes somebody feel good. That's really been helpful for me. Making sure I drink water. I feel like that's
Yes.
such a cliche, but honestly, I do always feel much better, like mentally and
Oh,
physically when
yeah.
I um uh taking my medication,
Hmm.
being compliant, that helps me a lot. And really practicing just giving myself grace and asking for help when I need it, whether it's I don't have the energy to be around someone or go out, or I don't have the energy to clean the house today. Like, it's okay,
Yeah.
it's fine. And not being so hard on myself has definitely been a practice that's helped me.
Yeah. And I think that's something a lot of people, especially women, struggle with too, giving ourselves grace and
Mhm.
forgiving ourselves, moving forward, instead of getting kind of stuck in that one spot. Well, Alexis, thank you so much for sharing your story. As we close, could you just tell our listeners how they can support you and where they can find you on social media?
Yes. So you can support me by listening to the podcast, following me on social media. It's just DNA Surprises, DNA Surprises on Instagram, TikTok, everything. Um, and then the podcast is called DNA Surprises, and it is available wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify. You can also visit the website at dnasurprises.com. And I just, again, want to say thank you to Elena, because what we didn't even get into here is that she was the first one to reach out to me and made me feel so welcome. And I really do attribute so much of that to this being a positive experience for me
Aw,
overall.
Well, thank you. I had to. Like, I went back and forth about it, but I was like, you know what? That's my sister. I'm reaching out to her. If she doesn't like it, she doesn't like it. But I had to be okay with that. I had to be okay with you not responding to me or kind of being like, I don't want to talk to you. But I did reach that point, and that's why I did. So I'm glad that it's turned out the way it has.
Me too.
Thank you, Alexis.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bipolar Buzz podcast, where we have the courage to slay stigma. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe for more and share with a friend.